this module, we will examine the performance and requirements for external wall systems. In this presentation, we will cover the design criteria for external wall systems, the 4 key risk areas for fire spread, the specific NCC fire requirements for external walls, the different facade system options available, how to deal with non-compliant facade systems, the sound requirements for external walls, and finally, weather-resisting considerations. External wall systems may have to be designed to satisfy a range of criteria, including structural performance for safety and serviceability, weather resistance, particularly resistance to water penetration, light and ventilation, including condensation control, energy efficiency, particularly the thermal insulation of the system, durability, and obviously fire performance and acoustic separation. It should be noted that the control of transmission of sound from external sources is not required by the NCC, but is likely to be part of the project design brief. The NCC Part A1, Section A1.1, Definitions, defines an external wall as the outer wall of a building which is not a common wall. The NCC does not, however, define what a wall actually is. In the context of the NCC, the accepted reference is that an external wall is a system that separates the interior airspace of a building with the outside airspace and includes any elements necessary to achieve the requirements of structural performance, weather tightness, thermal performance, non-combustibility, and the required FRL for the type of construction as defined in the NCC. Fire protection is one of the key functions of an external wall, and external walls need to address the risk of fire spread via the building facade under 4 specific scenarios. Firstly, fire spread from an adjacent building to the subject building. This is addressed by minimum separation distances, fire-resisting construction, and the requirement for external walls to be of fire-protected timber construction. Secondly, fire spread from the subject building to an adjacent building. This again is addressed by minimum separation distances, fire-resisting construction, and the requirement for external walls to be of fire-protected timber construction. And also, in this case, the provision of automatic fire sprinklers. Thirdly, fire spread from an external fire source adjacent to the facade other than adjacent structures. The external fire source could be, for instance, a car fire or a waste bin fire. Fourthly, vertical fire spread between openings from a fully developed fire within the subject building. It should be noted that the NCC prescriptive solution for external walls requires vertical separation of openings to be addressed in buildings of Type A construction to reduce the risk of fire spread between floors occurring if a fully developed fire occurs. This can be achieved by the provision of spandrel panels or horizontal projections. The NCC, however, waives these requirements if an automatic fire sprinkler system is provided in accordance with the NCC specification E1.5, which is the case for mid-rise timber construction. FRLs required for external walls are nominated in NCC specification C1.1 and are dependent on the building use or class of building, the type of construction, and the proximity to the boundary or other buildings. Class 2 and 3 mid-rise residential buildings, 4 to 8 stories in height, are required to be of Type A construction, whilst most Class 5 mid-rise office buildings, 4 to 8 stories, are also required to be of Type A construction, or Type B construction is permitted for 3-story office buildings. RISF and MRISF requirements are nominated in NCC specification A1.1. Requirements for Type A construction for Class 2 and 3 and Class 5 buildings are shown here. And it can be noted that the FRL requirements for general lightweight framing and massive timber are the same, regardless of building class. The RISF values for general framing are 45 minutes, whilst the MRISF values for massive timber are generally 30 minutes, except if the construction is less than 1 metre from the fire source feature. In this case, the MRISF is increased to 45 minutes externally to minimise the risk of fire spread from the adjacent structure. NCC specification C1.1, Section 3, Clause 3.1, subsection B, requires that an external wall in Type A construction must be non-combustible. The external face of the wall, or the building facade, may form the fire protective covering of a fire-protected timber member. For example, brick veneer construction, or alternatively, a non-combustible cladding system fixed to the fire-protected timber elements. Both also prevent external water penetration, as well as serving other non-fire related functions. This diagram illustrates a brick veneer external wall system. As masonry is deemed non-combustible and provides a 45-minute RISF, The brickwork external face could be assumed to form part of the wall system and provide fire protective covering of the fire protected timber members. Appropriate cavity barriers still, however, need to be provided, and any cavity insulation used must be non-combustible. This diagram illustrates a fire-protected general timber frame external wall with a lightweight cladding system to provide protection against the external elements. Note though, to comply with the NCC DTS provisions, this external cladding system must be non-combustible. There is no ambiguity here. This is what is required under the deemed to satisfy approach. Similarly, this diagram illustrates a fire-protected massive timber external wall with a lightweight cladding system to provide protection against the external elements. Again, to comply with the NCC DTS provisions, this external cladding system must be non-combustible. If a combustible cladding system is desired, then an alternative solution will be required. Wood Solutions Technical Guide number 18, entitled Alternative Solution for Fire Compliance, Facades, provides some guidance on this. In terms of sound performance for external walls, the NCC currently does not provide any provisions for external noise attenuation for buildings. Government authorities do, however, have regulatory or legislative powers to require control of noise entering buildings, in particular residential buildings. These requirements vary around Australia, and designers and specifiers should make inquiries in relation to their design or development. Wood Solutions has produced a technical guide number 11 entitled Timber Frame Systems for External Noise, which discusses this matter. It also provides some examples of lightweight external wall systems. However, being lightweight and combustible, they would only be applicable with an alternative solutions approach. Weatherproofing of external walls is also a key issue. Again, the NCC does not currently provide any deemed to satisfy provisions in regards to weatherproofing of external walls, and therefore reliance is placed on suppliers of water-resisting products and membranes to demonstrate compliance with the NCC performance requirement FP 1.4. It is important that installed water-resisting membrane systems for timber construction are vapour permeable to reduce condensation issues and allow the timber building components to breathe, but also that they do not permit water to penetrate from the external face through to the structural timber building elements. A number of suitable proprietary building wraps exist, providing this protection. So in summary, external wall systems must satisfy a range of criteria, including fire and acoustic performance. In regards to fire, the risk of fire spread needs to be addressed from the four major sources. Firstly, from an adjacent building to the subject building. Secondly, from the subject building to an adjacent building. Thirdly, from an external fire source adjacent to the facade, such as a car or waste bin fire. And fourthly, from vertical fire spread between openings from a fully developed fire within the subject building. The NCC also has specific requirements for FRL, RISF and MRISFs for external wall systems. Finally and importantly, external cladding systems must be non-combustible to comply with the NCC DTS provisions. Otherwise, an alternative solution is required. For further information on wood and wood products, visit woodsolutions.com.au, the website for wood.